You jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka, noozle, bippity bop, sheagle. You jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka, noozle, bippity bop, sheagle. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off.
Welcome to the weekend. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute. You're watching Independent Thinking. The state legislature's in session. Watch your wallet. To talk about it, our newly thinned friend, Cory Gardner. Representative, glad to have you.
Well, it's great to be here. Who knew our high school health teachers were right about exercise?
How much did you lose?
I lost about 35 to 40 pounds over the summer and since the spring.
And that was all the NutraSweet products you had?
Right. Well, after watching TV the other day, I found out there's a lot easier ways than exercise to actually
What
lose
were the
weight.
pills? So you took the pills? Green
tea. No, I didn't take anything. It was the old-fashioned way. Exercise and cut the junk food.
Sorry, I'm not doing either one of those.
And
so
I'm
going to the pill. Yeah. And from the Independence Institute, of course, Jessica Cory, glad to have you here.
Thank you. I actually have to beg to differ. It must be that Democrat prohibition on any sort of sugary beverages in schools that did it for you.
Exactly.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. They haven't cut it out of the state capitol yet.
Oh, thank goodness.
Wait a second. So you passed a law saying schools can't have
No, don't accuse
sugar,
me of that. They passed a law. Yeah.
No, you were part of it, buddy. You were there.
No, I voted
you
no.
failed in stopping it.
You're right.
All right, let's get to it. All right, let's talk a little bit about the budget first, because I want to do this. I'm hearing these cries that we're now $600 million short. Gasp, I say. And really what's at fault, of course, is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and what's known as the Byrd-Arbuscow Amendment. That's the amendment that says the state budget can only grow by 6% a year and no more. And obviously, if we didn't have those two things right now, if we could get rid of them, that $600 million would go away.
Oh, John, you're right. I think that's one of the biggest red herrings that we've heard throughout this debate about what to do with the $634 million revenue shortfall to the state. There's a lot of people out there saying that, well, this is the fault of Tabor, this is the fault of Byrd-Arbuscow, Arbuscow-Byrd, the 6% spending limit. But the fact is, if you repealed Tabor today, you'd still have to find $634 million to take out of the budget.
What if you remove the 6% spending limit?
Still have to take $634 million out of the budget.
Why?
We're in a time period, Tabor's not even in effect.
Because the money's not coming. The Tabor's not into effect. The
money's
spending
not there.
limit isn't in effect.
That's right.
So how in the world could this be stopping us from making the goals?
It's people who are trying to confuse the issues, try to take it out on their boogeyman, Tabor and Arbuscow-Byrd, and they're thinking while people are down, while the economy's down, here's the chance to get the thing that they hate the most. And it's unfortunate because if you look at what Arbuscow, Byrd, and Tabor have done, they've actually been able to keep us on a better economic stability level than many of our states that have had much worse downturns than we have.
Give me an idea. How big is $600 million? Now, I remember Newt Gingrich tried to make this simple point, and I think it destroyed his career. This simple little point that that when government plans a budget, it plans it ahead, and if it increases by 6%, but they only get 3% more money, that looks like a cut, but in fact it's still growing.
That's right.
People couldn't get this. So I'm curious, is that what's going on here in Colorado?
It's interesting, 1% of our budget. So if Arbuscow-Byrd allows us to grow by about 6%, 1% is somewhere between $70 and $100 million, depending on the year and depending on the general fund revenue. So if you're talking about a $600 million revenue shortfall, and Arbuscow-Byrd allows you to grow at 6%, which is going to be close to $600 million, you've got the answer right there. We're not talking going into and cutting and starting back. You're talking while they overspent in last year's budget and now they've got to bring it within no growth levels.
So will there be actual cuts, or will there just be cuts in planned expansion?
Right, because they actually they overspent from July 1 of this past year up until now. They were spending like there would be all of this money coming in. There probably will have to be cuts going back into this year. But next year, I think you're looking at a situation where you're just trying to make things match and balance.
This is where it gets fun, because everyone need to do a couple things. Either they need to raise tax revenue, which I don't think we have got a stomach for, and last year's election certainly showed that, or they're going to have to do what politicians hate to do, which is make priorities. That's, to say that midnight basketball is either more important or less important than roads. How are they going to solve this?
Well, it's interesting. This context couldn't be better for Republicans, truly. I mean, after such a bloodbath in this last election, we have a governor who supported a 5% spending increase and then had the guts to call it frugal, even though economists across the country, legislators including Josh Penner, were at the state capitol, at the podium saying, this is a problem. We are not going to have this money. We have Mayor John Hickenlooper, who was the Teflon mayor, who has supported 14 different tax increases in his tenure. So you have Democrat leadership that has again and again and again saying we're frugal by growing the size of government. And people, quite frankly, are not buying it anymore. And they're going to have to start making the tough cuts. We can no longer be talking about fixing symphony seats. And they've got a tough battle ahead.
What bothers me about this, and you see this all the time, we focus in on the amount of money coming in. That's the number. We're only concerned with what comes in. We're never concerned with the bang for the buck that goes out. We don't measure government by cost per repaired pothole, cost per bed, cost per hospital bed, cost per jail cell, cost per whatever it is. And when you start looking at it cost per, then all of a sudden you start to see where you might find savings, including things like competitive contracting. You know, RTD saves 40% through competitive contracting. Same buses, same routes, same schedule, same performance, 40% savings. The state budget, you can't contract out much, and right now you don't have the budget to do so. So let me ask you this. Will you and your colleagues do a hard look at this and find true savings, or will you do what's known as the Washington Monument Gamut, which is to find the things that people like? We're going to have to close the libraries on the weekend. We're going to have to close, you know, the tours to the Capitol Gold Dome instead of getting to the real stuff.
Well, again, I think the answer was in the governor's State of the State, where he did nothing but rely on the federal bailout to say we're going to be receiving money from the new Obama administration to make our state government programs continue, the hundreds of millions of dollars that the federal government's going to give us for transportation, the hundreds of millions of dollars the federal government's going to do to give us for health care. And so the answer is right there. No, well, and partly too, where you're hearing people talk about closing DMV offices, they're going to be taking children off of healthcare rolls, they're going to be closing down kindergartens. The sky is falling. You saw it when 5 years ago in 2005 with the so-called list of horribles when Referendum C was put forward, where they threatened to close state parks. You'll see it again. And so it's a two-step. We're going to rely on the federal government to solve our problems. We're going to scare people into convincing them that we need more of their money, and I think that's wrong. I think that we have an opportunity and an obligation to find money within existing resources to make ends meet.
You guys hired another 1,300 employees. Right. Governor Ritter came in and hired another 1,300 employees. You brought in a collective bargaining agreement. Now 31,000 state employees are exclusively represented by unions. And when he put in a hiring freeze, the Post reported, wait a second, he wasn't actually honoring that hiring freeze. Government's a lot bigger than it was 2 years ago. Give me an idea of the actual numbers.
Oh, it's a lot bigger. If you look at Bill Ritter's first year in the administration, he increased employees by around 1,500 people. His second year, I think it was another 1,000 people in his second budget, another 1,300 this past year. He has a hiring freeze that he put into place in October. October 1, I think he announced a hiring freeze, but the Denver Post recently reported that we've actually spent more money hiring new employees and giving people raises than the hiring freeze has saved. It's window dressing. It's a joke.
And again, I think we need to look to the local level and see that this is also happening. John Hickenlooper, just a couple months ago, I think as recently as November, was calling on City Council to raise the salaries of the top members of his cabinet. Meanwhile, now he's saying we need to make all of these difficult cuts. And what I think people out there should be watching for now is violations of Colorado's Fair Campaign Practices Act. We're going to see government leaders talking to their citizens about the difficult cuts that need to be made, whether it's street lamps at night or swimming pools or Saturday hours at the library. And they're going to try and coerce voters to support an upcoming tax increase instead of looking internally to see what sort of tough decisions should be made. Where should we stop hiring?
Well, that's going to be harder to do. I mean, look at last year. You had most of the school district tax increases. DPS passed theirs. I think Cherry Creek passed theirs. Jeffco failed. Others failed. Amendment 58, which was a tax increase on oil and gas, failed tremendously. Even this all-out attack on Tabor, 59, Andrew Romanoff's attack on Tabor to completely destroy it, that went down. And if the economy continues to grow the way it's growing, or going in the wrong direction, I should say, I don't see people have a stomach for this. And sooner or later, the leaders in your government and the other 3,000 governments in Colorado are going to have to make priorities.